Dear viewers, namaste and a very warm greeting to you all. Welcome to episode 8 of Bharat Awakens. First, the name Bharat is now recognized well, so we will use that. Today, we are discussing very recent events, primarily the immense joy in Bharat as the Mandir of Sri Ram Lala, the child Sri Ram or Raman, as he's known in the south, was finally opened, and the Pratishtha, the installation and consecration of the temple, was completed. What are the implications? Let's discuss. We have with us Dr. Nivedita Haran. Namaste, Dr. Narayanan Komerath and Shashank Devangere. Welcome once again to all of you. So, just a little introduction, although all these people are my partners in crime, but I still want to introduce these very talented people one more time. Dr. Nivedita Haran, she's a retired IS officer. Professor Narayanan Komerath, who is a professor, who has been a professor of aerospace engineering, and Shashank Devangere, who is an IT professional. And they, of course, bring back some special memories. My first question is going to go to Nivedita. So, Nivedita, you feel that this is a moment in history that must be marked. And could you tell us why?
Thanks, Anjali. Thank you for this opportunity. Uh, I have come across during the last couple of months generally two types of arguments leading up to the 10th Crown of Pratishtha. Those who were overjoyed with a sense of fulfillment and filled with gratitude that they were alive to witness this event, maybe digitally, but even so. And the second are those who felt that there is no reason to go overboard. And a government, a democratic government like ours, had no business to be in religion. Now, the Mandir in Ayodhya is much more than a religious temple. And I think most of us, even those who are not so literate, understand this fact. It's something which is linked to our civilization, our history, and of course, many other legal ramifications along with it. So one has to view it from that perspective. And most of the people I know understand that fact. Even those who are diehard, self-proclaimed agnostics now want to visit Ayodhya. Now, I want to say a simple thing here, Anjali, which is that, in the life of a nation and its people, there comes a time when it is kind of a tip over to either side. And I think, and I believe, and I strongly believe that for us, for India and for Bharat, the time is now. But it doesn't happen automatically. It won't be given to us on our laps. We have to work for it. We have to work with dedication and commitment. And I think many of the people understand that. That realization is there. You see, during partition, we didn't have that kind of a time when we just moved from a non-independent country to an independent one, because it was a gradual movement. And even at that time, the colonizers were more with the moderates, were acting with the moderates. You should remember that Gandhiji was actually not there. He was, in a way, away from it. He was unhappy about it. And therefore, it was a kind of thing that came gradually. And therefore, that kind of a one-off thing did not happen. Now is the time that it is happening, and it should happen, I feel so. If we are to really grow up into a big, developed country, as we are aspiring, I think this is the time. And this is the time for our nation building and for all of us to do our bit for it.
So, my next question will be to you, Narayanji. You have spent a lot of time and energy on Twitter or X, as they call it now. And what do you see there? What are the changes? What kind of discussions are going on?
Oh. Namaste, Anjali. Yes, I spent, or I should say, wasted a lot of time on social media long before Twitter or X existed. This is a remarkable time in the history of Bharatavarsha. When we were growing up, 1960s or whatever, the age of dinosaurs, certain things were obviously unjust, atrocious. We all knew it, but it was taboo for discussion because the nation was so new and fragile. We should not say or do anything that might make some people angry because they were presumed to be violently irrational. Those taboos have been shattered, and it is a moment of liberation. The people who were presumed to have been irrational and violent, and I do not mean any one community, have so far turned out to be very gracious. They speak out openly that the nation belongs to everyone. The nation's heritage is certainly part of their heritage. Yes, there are the usual fringe noisemakers and losers, but they are seen to be fringe noisemakers and losers, not the majority. So many superstitions, stereotypes have been shattered. India is seen to be truly special, young in spirit, but instilled with the grace of a civilization unbroken since time immemorial. That's what you got to remember. I'm learning so much about history every day. It's like being a child again. Meanwhile, the resurgent spirit of the nation is truly thrilling to witness. Before turning this over to Shashank's very serious account, and he is the star of the show, I have to tell you, let me recount my aha moment, which may illustrate why the Ram Mandir is such a big deal, even for somebody like me who comes from the deepest, deep south of India, so far away from so-called Aryan North India. It was 1999, a rough time in our history, remember. I was arguing with someone on the internet, it was long before Twitter, obviously, who was probably depressed that India was not doing this, India is not doing that. I thought he was repeating the same argument again and again after I tried to explain very patiently. So I said, look, my mother used to tell me in Malayalam, instead of calling me stupid, you read the whole Ramayanam and then you ask, so who was Sitan, the boy, to Rama, the girl? In Tamil, that might be Ramayanam appadi padichitan, apparam kelkuran, அந்த சீதனுக்கு ராம யாரு? This brought an immediate flood of laughter on the forum. My mom too. Sara Ramayan Pata, Fir Pucha, Seet ko Rama Kaun thi. Another recited the Assamese version, the Gujarati version, the Kashmiri version. So people may look different, talk different languages, be called Aryan or Dravidian or Maitai or Kuki. The Ramayana is our common heritage. Our mothers all over India scold their kids exactly the same.
That was truly funny, Narayananji. So let me turn to Shashank. Shashank, what are your impressions from the perspective of a younger generation?
Right. Thank you, Anjali, and thank you all for having me here. And Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
So, to be honest, I have never seen anything close to what we are experiencing currently. The euphoria or the expression of bhakti, that too from remote small villages in the country to Times Square in New York and everything in between. It is something else. So, my association with Ram Janmabhoomi, like many who will listen and many crores in India, goes back to 1989, 90. My grandmother was a very active participant of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. She was she was old by the time 90s arrived, but she had donated her 1 month's pension uh, for the Ram Janmabhoomi bricks for Ram Janmabhoomi, which was a very big, huge thing back then. The Ram Janmabhoomi Tirth Kshetra Trust actually received about 4 lakh bricks from about 5 lakh villages across the country. And uh, I'm proud to say that my grandmother's contribution is also a part of it. The other thing that I remember very vividly is my dad. He's a very non-political. He was a very non-political person back then. But he took me to only one rally. He said when Sri Lal Krishnan Advani ji came to Hyderabad during his Rath Yatra, he said he took me there. I was still a kid, but he took me there. The entire streets were, yeah, full of the Bhagwa flags, and my dad told me to remember that moment because he said you will remember this moment. And even now, 32 years later, it still gives me goosebumps. And I have a friend. I personally know many Karsevaks who went from Hyderabad and surrounding areas to Ayodhya in 1991 and 92. So I have a friend who was a medical student in Karnataka in 92, in 90. He left to go to Ayodhya in October 1990, and he had like 2,000 rupees in his pocket and the Jai Shri Ram bandana that people you try. Everywhere the train passed through, they were given aratis, they were given food, blankets, money, and everything. So this was in 1990 when Mulayam Singh Yadav was the chief minister, and he made a promise that not even a wing will flutter in Ayodhya. But somehow all of these people, like 3 or 4 lakh people, congregated near the disputed structure. This was the first time that so many people had actually gathered there. So they did not know what to do, how to do, or anything. They just gathered there to see what happens. Mulayam Singh Yadav and the police there, they made them take out their shirts and then made them lie on their chest on the scorching sun on the road. My friend still has scars from that day, and that's when the firing started. And he was about maybe 2 or 3 meters away from a guy who was shot, and he says it's pure luck that he's still alive, and while some of his friends lost their lives. And this was in 1990, right? By the time he came back to his college in Karnataka, he had 6,000 rupees in his pocket, in addition to the 2,000 he started with. So that should tell us the astha of the people back then. But compared now to that, we are in a completely different generation. This is a completely new phenomenon, I would say. The urban youth today, in their teens or 20s, they are the ones who are leading this round of bhakti, so to speak. The Insta or anywhere you look, it's full of youngsters expressing their happiness for the Ram Mandir. They are creating songs, they are modifying popular tunes, they are busting firecrackers like, it's like a second Deepavali. And more importantly, and this is where Professor had mentioned earlier, that this is where they are rebutting with facts all those who are opposing the Mandiram. It's not an easy task, right? Our generation, Anjali, most of us time we were like a pendulum, from the highs of Ram Janmabhoomi to lows of hiding after December 6th. But the current generation is absolutely lit. They are owning the demolition, everything since then. I remember during the peak of Ram Janmabhoomi movement, we had pencils which says "Garv se kaho, hum Hindu hai," and the Ramlala stickers, which you probably find everywhere. And there were only very few people in our school, which is a Sangi school. Even there, we had only few people who had those stickers on their exam pads. So the point I'm trying to make is the last 10 years of having a truly Hindu prime minister has fundamentally changed our psyche, I guess. We have destroyed the myth of Hindu growth rate once and for all. The statements of our EAM, Dr. J. Shankar, is looking the West in the eye. The global stature of Modi ji, ebullience of our economy, and all of those things have given our confidence back. And that is what we see in Bharat, as well as everywhere Hindus, Ram Bhakts are there.
So we have heard two accounts from, I would say, like two different generations. But one other phenomenon is the worldwide reaction. And I'm going to ask Nivedita, what do you see when we say that the reaction worldwide has been very remarkable, very noticeable? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, Anjali. But before I start off, I have to say that the kind of personalized account that was given just now, I think it's really, it's heartwarming that there are such accounts. One didn't know about it. Friends from outside the country have asked me, why such a ruckus? Why are you making such a big fanfare? Is it needed in a democracy like India? My reply to them is to give them a bit of a lecture on our civilizational background. Our history does not begin with the attacks by the invaders, looting our temples and subjugating the kings, the arrival of the European colonizers, again to loot, and finally, after a protracted battle of over 100 years, we gained independence. This is only our modern period history, so to speak. But prior to that period lies our early history of about 1,000 years old. The smaller kingdoms, the benevolent and the autocratic kings, and even prior to that, much prior to that, is our ancient history that dates back to 3,500 BC. It's mind-boggling, for people living in the West. They can't think back to 3,500 BC. And I was, Anjali, I want to share something since we are also being a little personal today. I was educated in good schools, what is called the English medium public schools. But I never studied about the Pandyas, the Pallavas, the Cheras, the Cholas in the south, with just a passing mention of the Guptas in the north. Why? How did Jainism come into Gujarat? Why did it flourish there? These are things we never studied in our history, in our sociology. The valor and bravery of Shivaji, of Ahilya Bai, how the Maharaja of Travancore, which I learnt only when I went to Kerala, stood up against the British. I never studied that in school. I wonder if Professor Narayanan did, being my generation. We have underplayed our past, let's face it, our culture, to the extent of making it so underrated that people believe that we were, a culture that came only a couple of 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we almost seemed apologetic about it. That's how our textbooks were edited. Let's not blame anyone. We were, and some still are, so enamored by the West. We are made to believe that this is the ultimate in knowledge, in literature, in politics, in governance, in development. We had equally good models, if not better models, in our own country. No public servant ever studies Kautilya's Arthashastra for that matter. We are never taught it. While it is one of the best works in governance and diplomacy, Indian philosophy is based on the tenet, the ultimate Brahman resides in all of us. No religion is small or big. It's just different parts to the same good, the same one. And the best knowledge is to know yourself, Tattvamasi. These are things that are something that are to be valued, but unfortunately, we haven't done that. No path is right or wrong, easy or difficult, and that's one thing that's very, very important to know. We are not judgmental in our religion or in our way of thinking. We do not decide any path is good or bad. They all lead to the same ultimate. And Hindu religion has emerged from this Indian philosophy. So my friends from abroad have started reading up, and that's a good sign. They have started reading up, and so when they argue with me, when they talk to me, when they email me, I find that they have started taking interest in Indian philosophy, and that's extremely good.
And I can relate to that, Nivedita ji. Just like you, I'm also from an English medium convent school where we never really studied much about the Cholas, the Pandyas. I did not even know about Rani Padmini until recently when these movies were released. So I would like to hear from Narayanan ji. What do you have to say? You're on mute. You're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
I'm so happy to hear what Nivedita ji had to say about this. I want to just emphasize it. See, back in 91 or 92, there was a violent and angry reaction all over the Islamic nations against what they perceived to be attacks on their religion in India by the unbelievers. But today, there's hardly any reaction, you notice. This is the most remarkable transformation over recent decades. While the rest of the world is certainly not very non-violent, as I see, I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but I credit the Indian Foreign Service and the leadership of India immensely for their unifying influence. At the center of the Islamic world, Saudi Arabia, there appears to be a growing realization and acceptance that we too believe in the same fundamentals. Hindus at the deepest level do, in fact, respect and accept anyone who believes in any form of what we call the Paramatman. Others may call it something else. At this level, we all begin to see the growing congruence of science and belief. That's a very important point to see. We don't run away from science. Every time there is somebody says, "Oh my goodness, there's a huge discovery," it sort of falls right in line with our own beliefs. We Hindus are even ready to accept the Nirishwaravadis, the atheists, as believers in themselves, if nothing else. They may be full of themselves, and that is fine. We are ready to accept those who call themselves Marxists and have their own form of worship. Perhaps it is a party secretary located in another country or state that they worship. At the highest levels of Islam, there appears to be some awesome leadership, and they are hand in hand with India's leadership, believe it or not, towards a truly inclusive vision of the future world. It cannot get any better than this. And that vision includes most definitely leadership based on the eternal truth of Sanatana Dharma.
So, Shashank, you heard Nivedita, you heard Narayananji. What are your thoughts? Would you like to add something more to what they just mentioned?
Sure. But before I go there, Nivedita ji are based on the new Rakigari findings. Our history has been pushed back further. It's not 3500 BC anymore. It's even further. Okay, I just wanted to make that. We'll probably have a show on the findings at a later stage. But coming back to what Narayanan ji has said, the 1992, after the Babri thing was demolished, there was a violent reaction, and I think I'm just going to take a little bit of time because we have to remember that 1992 was the peak of what is called the Wahhabism, right? On November 20, 1979, a group of armed militants led by Juhayman al-Otabi entered the Grand Mosque in Makkah, and they took the mosque hostage along with people, claiming that the Saudi royal family had lost its legitimacy because of corruption and deviation from the Islamic principles. The siege had lasted for over 2 weeks, resulted in hundreds of deaths and injuries. It was in response to that event that the Saudi government or the Saudi kingdom at that point in time began to enforce a stricter interpretation of Islam. Okay, that's the Wahhabism. That's the root of the Wahhabism. They spread it across the world, which started in 1979. They funded mosques, which took all this extremist thoughts across the world. And 1992 was just like a decade from it. So it was really at the peak of Wahhabism that this happened. So the violent reactions, as Professor and Nivedita ji had noted, because of that. But coming to 2023, 2024, we have Mohammed bin Zayed of UAE and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi. They are trying to actually temper down this particular strain of Islam. Over the past few years, they have started the process of promoting religious tolerance, introducing yoga, making the niqab, hijab not compulsory, no loudspeaker on mosques and things like that. MBZ, the Mohammed bin Zayed, has even started talking about Bhagavad Gita. 30 years ago, if somebody had said this, I would like, put them in, people would have said that go join a Nimhans or some mental hospital. This is a phenomenal change. The reason I know you asked about worldwide, I'm focusing mostly on the Middle East, mainly because up until 2020, 2022, the Indian Muslim community in India looked towards Saudi or Turkey for, as their caliphate. But when Smriti ji visited Medina like last month, she did not cover her hair. Arabs there did not find it offensive, and it was the subcontinent Muslims who were the most vocal against going there without. So while the 1992 brings us back memories from harsh reactions from the world, 2024 was all about harmony, and they are starting to get back to their roots. So a lot of water has flown in the Sarayu since 1992, and I believe this is only a beginning.
So here's a tough question. What lies ahead? And Nivedita, I'm addressing this question to you. What lies ahead?
Yes, it is a tough question, and it's going to be tough times. Uh, but it's our call now, Anjali. Can we as a nation rise up to the occasion and take our country forward? It is on our shoulders. On our shoulders, by mean our countrymen's shoulders, including people like you who are based abroad. I'm a very practical person from administration. Let me give you a few small figures. 2 crores houses in the next 5 years for the homeless, for those living in kacha houses, interest-free loans for startups. That means jobs, gainful employment. 11 lakh crores of rupees on building infrastructure. Again, more employment, better roads, better railways, airports, civic services, that will attract more tourists, make our lives more comfortable, and so on. These are important things. This is how a nation progresses. I have a message for the government and for the non government sectors. Those in the government have to perform. I think I have said it before and I say again, our public servants have sometimes been the weakest link. I think that has to be done away with. They have to perform, we have to perform with sincerity and dedication. Keep the corrupt practices out that has been eating into our society. For the others, for the non-government, I have to say that each of us have a role to perform. It doesn't matter where we are, but we are all working for a particular aim, whether it's the farmer, the tradesperson, the student, the housewife, the street vendor, and even the big corporates. For once, let's keep our country first. You know, we have been a country where, in some ways, patriotism has been sidelined. It has even been looked down upon sometimes. Let's take it to the pinnacle of development. Let the people be the best, not only intellectually, but also filled with humility mixed with self-confidence, honesty and civic sense. Make each road and park clean and well maintained, which I'm trying to do. Our environment healthy and pure, our water bodies, rivers, tanks, ponds filled with clean water. This is only one aspect of it. So I wish to see, in short, a Bharat that excels in every field, whose people enjoy prosperity and where there is happiness all around. I aspire for a Ram Rajya, and I think it is possible.
Your vision of a Ram Raja definitely sounds very promising, and you've raised some very important points. I would actually ask this next question to Narayananji, which is pretty much the same which I asked Nivedita. What do you think lies ahead? You're on mute again. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
I'm going to introduce a note of discord, perhaps, but I want to step back and look at the Ayodhya Mandir story. The rebuilding and inauguration of the new Mandir is an awesome spectacle. So is the joy of the people. But the Prime Minister himself asked Sri Ram for forgiveness for the long delay in getting here. So why did it take so long? Let's go back. The Babri Masjid was not a major place of worship for Muslim residents, let alone visitors to Ayodhya. Everyone knew what it was. It was a monument to savage imperial arrogance, bigotry, genocide, utter humiliation of a gentle population. There was never any attempt to hide that. There was never any attempt to hide the fact that it was built straight into the ruins of the destroyed Mandir of Sri Ram. That was the whole point. The conquerors made sure that the pillars of the so-called masjid were pillars from the Mandir, still with representations of Hindu lore, idols. This is haram in true Islamic belief, to have a real masjid. The inscription was still clearly visible. I'm quoting from the video of the former chief of the Archaeological Society of India, himself a Muslim. It said, "This is the birthplace of the dark-skinned avatar of Vishnu who destroyed the 10-headed Rakshasa." How much clearer can it get? So the gentle Muslim believers in the area were, I think, if anything, from all I know, embarrassed. The structure was not used much in prayer or worship. The lawsuit was filed long before Indian independence. I looked it up. The proof in historical pass-downs and visible evidence was very, very clear. Since 1822, not anytime 1959, no, 1822. I quote from Wikipedia, which quotes from more original sources. Hafizullah, a superintendent at the Faizabad court, of course, he happened to be a Muslim, submitted a report honestly to the court in 1822 in which he claimed the mosque founded by Emperor Babur is situated at the birthplace of Ram. So my question is, why did it take the Indian legal system 197 years to hand down a decision that was so slam dunk obvious? It is not up to me to criticize the legal system. I suppose better late than never. But perhaps this should be carefully studied where India teaches law. We are talking about what in the future, and I think some lessons need to be drawn about this and to do something about it. For the future, I hope decisions about similar cases should be rational, evidence-based, swift, definite. No more nonsense. The situations are perhaps far worse in Mathura, birthplace of Sri Krishna, Kashi, holiest of holy places, and a Shiva shrine. In fact, given the precedent, a good faith negotiated settlement is the need of our time. We need to move on, but not by abandoning the best of our culture. Absolutely not. I strongly believe that there is both the goodwill and the trust and the resources to ensure that everyone can be proud of their own traditions.
So, Shashank, it'll be very interesting to know your point of view on what lies ahead.
That's a very good question, and it can be answered in multiple ways. I'm going to take some time to walk through my answer, so I apologize in advance
Please
because
do.
it's going to take
Absolutely.
some
You
time.
have all the time.
So I'm going to talk about both the things which the professor and Nivedita ji had mentioned, but we'll take the professor first. Professor mentioned about reclaiming, Kashi and Mathura, but our efforts, in my opinion, our efforts should not stop there. Sri Sitaram Goel and Arun Shauri, in their seminal work, The Hindu Temples and What Happened to Them, give a list of 40,000 temples which were destroyed, and then either church or a mosque were built over it. During the peak of Ram Janmabhoomi movement, this is in the 80s, late 80s, 90s, early 90s, the VHP, BJP, and RSS had a proposal, said, give us these three, Mathura, Kashi, Ayodhya, and we'll forget about the remaining 39,997. And I'm going to go on a bit of a loop here. As a professor clearly mentioned, Babri was never a place of worship. In fact, according to Dr. Meenakshi Jain, who has written 3 books on birthplace of Rama and the battle for Rama, she says that the mosque itself was probably built during Aurangzeb's time and not during Babur's time. So there is about 150 years between the destruction and the construction of the mosque. And no waqf property was attached to it. As in case people do not know, every mosque has a waqf attached to it, since that is the money that is generated from the waqf, which is paid, that is used to provide livelihood for the Maulvi in the mosque. Similar to what temples had lands associated with it, the revenue generated from the lands from the temple would be used to pay salaries and things for the priest, and then doing the yearly or daily abhishek and things like that. Similar to that, the waqf is attached. Babri never had a waqf attached to it, and this is where I believe that it is, as our professor said, a monument to imperial arrogance, of bigotry, of genocide, of utter humiliation of the population. Coming back to 1980s, when there was still some sanity left in the others, they were ready to hand over this site to Hindus amicably. They were like probably 1 or 2 sessions away from saying, take Ayodhya, we don't want it. This is when the left liberal ecosystem started its vulgar display. They urged the other side to not give in, and they said they will support they created what's called Save Babri, and then egged on by them, this went on to court, and then obviously we will never let it go, because आखिर आस्था का विषय है, so we cannot ever let it go. Maybe Dr. Nivedita ji would probably know this better. The reason I'm bringing this up is because with almost everything that is currently wrong in our country, the root cause, if you trace it back, always lands up in left liberals, brought up, nurtured by the Nehruvian school of secularism, which is to be anti-Hindu. So now back to the main line, because I
I
went
just
on a
wanted
loop.
to I just wanted to add a comment. When nowadays the secularism is spelled differently. It's called not SEC, it's SIC, secularism, right?
Secularism,
It's
yeah.
associated with sickness, mental sickness.
That is
Sorry, I
that.
didn't mean to
Yeah, no,
disturb.
that was also created by social media. So the impact of social media on all of these things is phenomenal. Thank you for bringing it up. So, but coming back to the main line, because I went on a loop. So our guys made this offer of only 3, but they were laughed at. And as Modi ji said in his speech on Pran Pratishtha, the Kala Chakra, or wheel of time, has turned. Maybe we are not willing to be satisfied with 3. I read out a little bit during the recent judgment of the allowing ASI, archaeological survey of the Gyanvapi Mandir complex. The Supreme Court made a very statement, and I quote: "The Act says you can't alter or convert nature of place. They are not seeking conversion of the place. The question is, what was the status of the place as of August 15th, 1947? That is the Places of Worship Act. Okay, in other words, they gave the dharmic side a great foot in the door to determine the actual status of the place. It is using this loophole that the survey was done at the Gyanvapi Mandir, and the results were announced like 2 or 3 weeks ago, just around the time of Pran Pratishtha. So, in effect, what I'm saying is, at least to me, it's 1 down, 39,999 to go. Okay, that's just me. Okay, now coming back to what Nivedita ji had mentioned, and that's what I'm more excited about, is we are reclaiming our places. It's the rebirth of what's called Mandironomics or Dharmikonomics. Call it by whatever name, the concept remains the same. Nivedita ji, I have actually read the Arthashastra. It's in multiple commentaries of it in two different languages, both Telugu and English. So the Chanakya's Arthashastra, the temples played a pivotal role in the spiritual and economic life of a village. And in Chanakya's vision, the village forms the basic unit of any economic activity. This integration of a temple into a village was not just about religion. It was temples served as centers for economic and community development. They were just more than places of worship, as I will explain in a bit. They offered vital community centers, forms of economic activity. They owned large tracts of land, which were used for agriculture. They created a self-sustaining economic cycle where the temple acted as a catalyst for the local growth and development. Apart from that, the temple also served as the hub for arts and education. Okay, so and excuse me, and so this not only enhanced the cultural richness of the temple and the surroundings, but also it gave great patronage to arts and crafts. That's why you see the Bharatanatyam, the dance form itself, was carved was sculpted on temples. So it and art throughout our history, art has always been associated with one temple or multiple temples. So in Ocean of Churn, in the book Ocean of Churn by Sri Sanjeev Sanya, he talks about ancient trader guilds. These were our version of multinational corporations, but way more interesting. Okay, these guilds were like clubs where traders and artisans got together, not to just sell spices or anything, but they also set up. They also had a roadmap of how to navigate, where to go, how to go. If a trader, for example, if a trader from Coimbatore wanted to sell something in Srivijaya, which is Indonesia, so the trader guild would be able to help guide him on how to get from Madras Madras to Srivijaya and come back, and how to navigate, how to get local guides there and things like that. So we are talking about globalization, and our trade guilds extended from Africa through Southeast Asia. And also a little bit up to China, but then China went into a different zone by the time when we were really big in trade. So these were like these guilds were setting up infrastructure, building roads, rest stops, and everything. So here's where it gets interesting. The guilds were not just about the money. They took our thoughts and our philosophy wherever they went, and that's how Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism spread across Southeast Asia. Okay, so where did these guilds meet? In the temples. There are temples in Tamil Nadu where the meeting minutes of these guilds were recorded on the stone, were carved on the stones of the temple. So it's not just about not just about religion, it's about economy. Now let's take one more look. Nivedita ji had mentioned about water harvesting and ecology and things like that. Guess what? The temples were not just about spiritual gatherings or economic activities. They were also at the heart of water conservation. Each temple had its own big tank. Especially, you can see this in the temples in the south now, because the temples in the north were destroyed over the last 1,000 years. But every temple in the south has a big pond just in front. The rainwater that gets the rainfall gets harvested, and then it's deposited in the tanks. So this is an ancient form of rainwater harvesting. the tanks were not just about holding water for the dry season, they were also recharging the water table. So, and every year or every 6 months there would be a session where people would come together and clean the tanks to make sure that the water is clean and everything. So it was not just about religion or drinking. The water from these would irrigate the fields nearby, and the maintaining the temple tanks was a whole community service. Community, it brought that community together. Okay, so we talked about how Chanakya's Arthashastra, a village is a fundamental block, and how temples played a key role in village economy and water table management, right? So people might be thinking, why is it that relevant now? The reason is precisely this is what Modi ji is doing. He's bringing back the mandironomics, which means the economy of the country driven partly by the complete the tapestry of mandirs. Modern temples could become the center for community-driven renewable energy projects, rainwater harvesting, hubs for local artisans and farmers to sell their goods. And I'm not even talking about the entire ecosystem that goes into sustaining the bhakts visiting the temple, hotel, food, lodging, sightseeing, souvenirs, and all of those things. So this could spur a new kind of economic model, one that is rooted in the community. It is sustainable and also our cultural heritage. By reviving this temple-based economic, we would be knitting the communities closer together instead of not just export-based economy, but a community-based economy. And so what I would say is we are taking our ancient learning, the one that made India Sone ki Chidiya, not just once, but it sustained us for thousands of years, and then re-engineering that to our future. It's about creating a future that's sustainable, economically viable, and deeply rooted in India's cultural ethos. And I'm not even exaggerating now, but I would say that the Kashi, Mathura, Ayodhya circuit, that will be the engine which will drive UP towards 1 trillion economy, and by extension, India to a 10 trillion economy by 2034. And this will be done across the tapestry of our nation, from Marthanda Surya Temple in Kashmir to the Shakti Pita in Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka, to Hindlaj Mata in Balochistan, to the ancient Pravanban temple in Indonesia. So this area is our area of influence, and this is where we will probably see this mandironomics playing it up. And I honestly think that is what Modi ji meant when he said we need to think about the next 1,000 years. The ancients will rise again. So that is what is coming up next, in my view.
Thank you so much, Shashank, for giving us so much knowledge on mandironomics, which used to prevail in ancient India, and how Modi ji is now using the same idea. And Narayanan ji, I think you had a comment, right?
I'm so used to being a professor. Everybody has to listen when I speak. They're never allowed to mute me. So I
We are
wanted to say a couple of things.
Yes.
One is, all that times wasted or I thought wasted on social media and the internet over the past 30 years is really beginning to pay off listening to somebody like Shashank here. This is the new generation. Does he sound like a religious fanatic? He's a very, very practical minded, I would say, whatever. Anyway,
Thank you.
this is modern India.
I second you.
Yeah.
Narayanan.
And that is what people need to understand. So, but let me go back and again, like millions of others, hundreds of millions of others, I watched the Ayodhya proceedings on TV. Of course, I had no intention, and sorry, it's not like I was boycotting an invitation to the temple, as I might have claimed on social media. But it was so much better and that is the only way I could watch it, like most people. One more thing I want to interject. The word secularism I think, has been hijacked by very evil people. I consider myself very secular. I'm going to say that right out here. I studied in independent India in government schools. We learned what secularism was really about, and I really truly believe in it. I practiced it very successfully in the West and here. And that's got nothing to do with the nonsense that is going on as far as I see on Twitter, whatever. But we can get back there. So the prior evening, we spent the prior evening with relatives who had to go out and buy a new TV because their big set was on repair and it wasn't going to come back in a couple of days. So I remember posting on social media. I was sitting and watching the new TV. So what is that I see? Is that a reflection on the steel frame of the Prime Minister's glasses below his steely eyes? Or a tear? And people responded, no reflection, that is a tear. There's another famous photo on the internet. It shows a professional photographer, tough guy, bearded, hardened by all the terrible things he must have seen. When the image turned to the Pratishtha in his zoom lens, he could not keep his eyes open. He was crying. Okay? The tears were streaming down his cheek. So I noticed that. And later, someone who was a veteran of the 1990-91 events that Shashank described said, 80 meters from the Pratishtha, everyone was crying. So I tried to get a rise out of him. I said, I remember I'm the secular person, right? So I said, why? Because of the crush getting there. Okay. 500,000 people went there, remember, the first couple of days. Must have been quite a crush, but apparently with amazing order. They were so well behaved. He didn't yell at me. He said, Narayanan, many of our friends in our youth did not come back. Okay, so we remember their sacrifice. So we learn in textbooks about the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh. But from what I have learned, I wonder if the number of people killed, I was there in 1990, may have been far larger.
It was.
It was, yeah.
They died as heroes. And I include the many Indian policemen who were ordered to kill their own people. And apparently there were some helicopter pilots who were ordered to machine gun unarmed people in the streets from above. Maybe on top of the Babri Masjid, I don't know. This is part of our history. And I'm sorry, but if a child were to ask me, why did these people have to die in their youth? The only answer I can say is because justice was delayed for at least 197 years. Okay? They were vindicated. So this time it was my turn to cry.
And we all have tears in our eyes. Dear viewers, it's true that Ram Mandir did not happen just like that. It was not an easy ordeal, as you heard them say. So many people have sacrificed their lives. There were so many eyes that were waiting, just like Shabri did, for their Ram to arrive. There were devotees who did not wear shoes for years. And then there were devotees who went into silence for years. Sri Ram did not disappoint us. Ram Mandir consecration or Pran Pratishtha, a much awaited, joyous event, has finally happened. And that too in our lifetimes. And that is all that matters. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
Yeah.
Jai Shri Ram.